I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 288 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today I am talking about purposeful pauses, or how to structure a season of anti-hustle. I don't know if that sounds like an appealing idea to you or not, because so many of us are wired to hustle, or at least we feel like we're wired. We've been wired to hustle, or maybe trained to hustle over time. We don't really know any other way. And I hear so many stories of women who have been working since, the age of 13, maybe as a babysitter or some other sort of small job around their community. And then by 16, they have a full-blown job that they're doing on weekends and nights. They work through college in addition to carrying a full credit load. And then, kind of get on to graduate and go straight to work and maybe work and do grad school at the same time. Just this rush, hurry, grind, do culture that we're all sort of swimming in. And it can feel wrong or weird or awkward to slow down for any period of time. I remember vividly that I was in this rush culture. And I graduated from college a year early. So 3 years, kind of pedal to the metal. And I had a job offer, a full-time job offer that I knew I was going to accept. And somehow I got the courage to ask if I could start at the end of the summer instead of right after graduation. To this day, it astonishes me that I did that, but I did. And I took that summer to be at home with my parents. I hadn't lived at home. I had done internships in other cities after my first year and my second year. And then here I was ready to graduate, and I was moving, kind of across the country. And I took that summer to be at home, and I have never regretted that decision. That time to just be kind of fully present with my family. We did a lot of things with my young cousins that summer. We did a little bit of travel, and I just spent some time not having the pressure of exactly what was coming next, kind of that load of things to do on my shoulders. And it, again, is kind of miraculous that I did it, because it doesn't really jive with my personality, or at least it didn't at that time. But I really have looked back on that season as one that I'm so glad that I took. And I had several other times, most notably, I think, my maternity leaves. I had a female manager when I did not yet have children. And she took a 1-year maternity leave, most of it unpaid. But at the company I worked for, you could do that and come back to the same or equivalent job. And it was very rarely taken advantage of, right? The policy existed, but it wasn't real. It was not very often that people did it. I think there was a lot of fear. And also, it's hard to go without income for that chunk of time. And it was very inspiring to me that she had the courage and the clarity. She was so clear that that was important to her. And she took a year. I had been working for her while she was expecting. And when she went out on that leave, I actually took over her position. And she was out for that year. And she came back, and she was actually my boss again when she came back. So I had this really extended time of watching her model that behavior. And then I did it with both of the pregnancies and childbirths that I had while I was working for that company. I took the same thing. I took year-long maternity leaves and never regretted, the time to just be fully in one season, one thing that was going to consume my full attention. And I am aware that financially is not practical for everyone. It certainly required sacrifice on our part to do it. But it's a time that I look back on and say, yeah, I really was able to soak in the experience of being a new parent by taking some time. And I'm really glad that I did. So that's the kind of thing I want to talk about today is, where are we called to these seasons where it's like an anti-hustle is the right vibe? There's a sense that we need to be present for one thing and really give it our attention and our energy and our effort. And I think there are a couple of variations of what this could look like. They could be short, very short seasons of anti-hustle, or longer. Like I talked about a summer in one example here, or a year in another. They could be shorter or longer than that. It might be by choice. Both of the examples I gave you were times when those were by choice, but it might be an I had no choice season. There might be times in life where we are just sort of thrust into a season where things have to operate at a different pace. I think there's variations where we choose to embrace it and really celebrate that season, and maybe some where we feel like we have to endure the experience of anti-hustle. It might feel so awkward or wrong to us. It might not have been our choice, that we need to endure that season. And the season can be used for a couple of different purposes. It could be used to help us get back to the way things were, right? We could use it to sort of restore ourselves, or to move us forward into a new way of being. Right? They think about that example of, as a new parent on an extended maternity leave, there was no going back happening. It was about moving forward with some grace into this new season and giving some space for the transition. And I think there's a lot of examples of this. If we really look at history or look at society, there are places where we sanction these kind of experiences. Maybe most notably, like the summer break for kids. Like that's a season of anti-hustle where we're taught as we're growing up that we sort of work hard during the school year, doing homework, doing extracurricular activities, having to get up at a certain time. There's like a pacing and a structure. And then we take a couple of months, sometimes a few months, to dial it back. And if your kids are like mine, wake up a little later, stay up later, have more of a fluidity of how the week is structured, not have the activities to be in at the same level of rigor that they are during the year, not have homework. There's a very different pace. It's an anti-hustle season. And we're taught that kind of feels right to us when we're growing up. I think we see it in periods like the gap year that has become more popular lately, where kids are taking a year either after high school or after college to sort of not hustle, not rush into the next phase, but to put some breathing room between them to have a different kind of experience. And it's like a polarizing idea. There are certainly some people, maybe you're even one of them listening, thinking, why would someone do that? And yet there's many people looking at this saying that makes a ton of sense, especially if you have a young adult who isn't quite sure what they want to do, right? Is rushing them into an education with a fixed pathway really the right idea? Does it really kind of help with the return that they'll have on that time and the financial investment that they're making? Gap years can make a lot of sense for some kids. I think another example that I already shared was maternity leave. We look at it, boy, I wish there were universal paid leave in this country that I live in, but we look at it around the world as a time that requires a new parent to step out of the hustle of everyday life to really bond with and reestablish the relationship with this new child who's in their family. And we're seeing paternity leaves increasingly being paid options as well. We're certainly in the fight for paid maternity leaves broadly in this country. And again, around the world, that's a very normalized event to say, of course, we want this mother to spend time bonding with and creating a relationship with this baby, and also healing herself from the experience of pregnancy and childbirth. Sabbaticals would be another example. Again, I worked for a company where every 7 years you could take a sabbatical. It was an unpaid experience, but for several months you could take time to go do something else. And I remember a good friend of mine taking 3 months when her kids, I think it was when her oldest was graduating from high school. And she took 3 months and they did an extended family travel experience together, where that just wouldn't have happened if she stayed in the hustle of the work culture. So stepping out of it to say, I'm going to go create this window of opportunity to be with my kids. People have taken sabbaticals for all kinds of reasons, traditionally in academia, but then also increasingly in business, to do something that declutters the mind in a different way. And, I was even thinking about honeymoons, like the tradition of taking a trip with your new spouse to just get away from everything, all of the wedding planning, all of the anticipation, and to have that period of time to just be together and not in the hustle and grind of everyday life. I think these are examples. I'm sure there are others that, we can call to mind that kind of illustrate the benefits of having one of these seasons. Some very short, honeymoon might just be a week, right? Some of them longer, a year or more of time out of the everyday. Hi, it's Cheryl Ann. Thanks for listening. Did you know that the ideas I share on this show are things I also can help you implement? If you want me in your corner helping you find more time for what fills you up, go to brilliant-balance.com/schedule and sign up for a free exploratory call. Give yourself this time. You'll be so glad you did. In addition to these examples that I was just sharing, I think there could be patterns of times, sort of categories of times that we might want to think about as when we feel like we might need a season of anti-hustle. And I want to just insert here the thought that I talked about this during keynote address that I was giving at an event a few months ago. And the reason I'm doing this episode today is because someone wrote to me after that event and said, I never really thought about why I had structured this season to be at the pace that it's at. Like, I kind of referenced this concept of we get to build the business. I was talking to entrepreneurs that fits our lifestyle, right? How fast do you want to run? How hard do you want to push? And what fits into the rest of your life? And this woman was saying, I feel like I have structured a season in which I'm not really pushing super hard. Like, I'm doing some things, but I'm not in that pedal to the metal kind of grind because I have children who are in a really full season of life, and I want to have enough of my attention available to them. And I am at peace with that. This isn't a time when I want to be running full tilt professionally because I want to be running full tilt as a parent. So we all make different choices, but I think it's not something we talk about a lot, that we may have more control over this than we're giving ourselves credit for in terms of how hard we want to push. So I'm going to talk about times where we're really dialing it way back, maybe to not working at all, or maybe to working a reduced work schedule or not gunning for the promotion. But there would be variations of this in terms of how significantly we would be dialing it back into this anti-hustle. I came up with at least 4 seasons that we might be paying attention to that might be clues that this is something you want to think about. One of them would be to savor or honor the moment. And that's kind of what I was talking about as it relates to maternity leave. There's this sense of really wanting to be fully, deeply present in that season. Maybe something like approaching an empty nest. I had a client a couple of years ago who had twins that were entering their senior year. Actually, have had 2 clients have that experience recently of twins going into their senior year, in really wanting to be fully immersed in all of the wonderful experiences that come with that senior year experience, and not wanting, therefore, to be traveling a ton were doing a lot of like, again, that kind of pedal to the metal exertion because they wanted to have the scheduling flexibility to really lean into those experiences with their kids. I think a time that you're maybe leading up to a wedding. I remember when I was getting married, just how many things I was excited about and thinking about that had nothing to do with work. I was thinking about all of the wedding planning and the honeymoon planning and the household planning. There were just so many exciting things happening. And it was such a season of celebration many, many years ago. But that may be one. And, on the other side of life, maybe if a loved one is nearing the end of life, if there's an illness or an aging that is happening where we really want to be more present because we know that the time is very limited. So whether it's for really jubilant seasons or sort of poignant seasons, bittersweet seasons, there could be a desire to just savor and honor the season that we are in. And doing that by having some time where we're taking a purposeful pause to really be in that moment is one way to do that. Another time where we might be thrust into this is illness or injury. If you think about, there are times when we ourselves or someone close to us is either ill or injured, where our life becomes about the healing process. And that is a purposeful pause. We have lower energy, or the person involved, there's sort of this diminished capability to go at the pace that we are accustomed to going, right? So that might call us to slow down. There might be a ton of appointments or therapies, right? There might be, like, I'm thinking about people who have to go through physical therapy and occupational therapy as they're coming through like an accident or injury of some kind. Whether the illness is physical or mental, there can be a ton of capacity required to address it. And this is our work in that season. It doesn't run well on top of a lot of other work. And so creating room or space to say, hey, I need to be in a purposeful pause. I need to acknowledge that in my own being. I might need to communicate that with some other people who are involved so that I can give this more of my attention. And I know many parents and adult children of aging parents who have walked through this either with their spouse, one of their siblings, their own parent, one of their children, or themselves. And so all of those examples as it relates to illness and injury can really call us to that season of a purposeful pause. Another one that I think could be at play is when we need to rest after a period of exertion. So I think of this as like a recovery or a restorative season to kind of relight our pilot light. It's gone out, we've been really pushing, and we just need to kind of dial it back so that our creativity can be replenished, our physical energy can be replenished, we can get some sleep that we might have not had. And so think about those busy seasons or rush seasons that a lot of careers have. I always think about busy season in accounting when we say this, like tax season. A lawyer who's on a really big case that they've been on maybe for a couple of years, just running, and their brain is running all the time. Having a period of time to intentionally recover from that and kind of get ready for what's next can be really important. And I think often we don't give ourselves that opportunity. We rush from one period of exertion straight into the next one, and we don't have this downtime in between to recover, to do the things that bring us back to center. And we know it, we feel it when we go from sprint to sprint. The last one that I want to talk about is like, please ponder, right? Please ponder these experiences or these seasons to see if any of them apply to you. The last one is when we are between chapters and it's time to choose a new direction. This classically comes up if someone is resigning from a job, retiring from, their first career or a chapter of a career, or when they lose their job. in a layoff or they get fired for some reason, there is often this wonderful moment of opportunity to just take a purposeful pause, but it's so scary. And so many people that I've coached want to jump right into the next thing. They want to have that job offer tomorrow and they want to start the next day. And I'm constantly saying, could we construct just a little bit of a beat here? Can we take a beat to figure out how did that feel? Why didn't that one work? Why didn't I want to stay? Or why didn't they want me to stay? And what am I going to learn from that that's going to help me shift direction into something new? Divorce is another example of this. A relationship ending, even if it's not a marriage, or a divorce where we are between chapters. Something significant has ended. And if we rush straight into the next version of it, we miss the moment to really be with the experience and bring closure to it and learn from it before we move into the next thing. So it's really hard to jump off of one moving train onto another. That's an advanced move. It's far better to maybe bring the first one to a halt and gently step onto the next train before it starts moving. So it gives us a little time to think, to discern, to choose, maybe to course correct before we just fly by the seat of our pants into the next thing. And if we're honest, I think there's a lot of fear involved in rushing those moves. There's so much fear of what happens if I'm in this sort of trapeze moment where I'm in between the two bars. And yet so much goodness can happen in that pause when we're not rushing to the next thing. Benefits, so many benefits of these. And again, I'm doubling down on this because I think we don't do this very naturally, do we? We don't feel like we're allowed to do this. This is not the norm or the societal expectation. But if we do take a pause, it gives more time and more space for whatever it is, whatever the thing is that has called us into this season. It allows us to bring our full attention or more of our attention to that so we can be fully present, with the full force of ourselves involved. And so the entire idea behind a purposeful pause is to eliminate the distractions, to eliminate our energy being kind of frittered away into smaller things. It's the recognition that whatever this thing is that's calling us into this season is asking more of us. And that if we don't tamp down the expectations in other places, we're going to get crushed, by trying to do it all at the same time. I want you to ask yourself, do you need one? Do you need a purposeful pause? Are you in one and you just haven't named it? You haven't had language around what you're doing. Do you need to kind of claim this season and this space in a way that you give yourself permission to behave differently than maybe what your norm is? And where you also are able, if you need to give context to the people around you of why you're doing this or what is going on. If you need permission, borrow mine. Take it from me. I'm giving you permission to say, you may only need a week of just slowing down the pace of the train that you're on to feel restored. And you may need a longer season, but I think it's worth the experiment if any of these kind of territories resonated with you today. So I'm so glad you tuned in to listen, to have this conversation with me. And I hope that you'll take my invitation, if you need it, to a purposeful pause. And by the way, if you're in a season of it's go time, pedal to the metal, I am excited and energized about everything and my life needs lots of juice, that's great too. There are plenty of those. This is more about knowing where you are and honoring the reality of it from either side of that equation. Come follow along on Instagram. I am at cskolnicki, or you can do brilliant_balance. Those are the two accounts where I would say we're the most active in terms of staying in touch with this amazing community. If you are a Facebook user and you want to come join our Facebook group, we have a fairly significant Facebook group community of women in this life stage And it's a great place to go to crowdsource kind of some tips and ideas and information and share some things that are on your mind. You can do that by going to Facebook, and it's just Brilliant Balance. That's the name of the group. We will help you find your way into that. And that is all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.